In this video, we're going to go through API request feature in API Explorer. API Explorer is a feature-rich module in Brobench that everything about saving API requests, executing them, and viewing the responses, and keeping the API, different versions, so on and so forth. Okay. There's a lot of capabilities, so we're going to split into different pipe pieces and cover that. The first one is the API request, how to create new requests, how to send them, how to process the response, view and explore it. So we're going to create other videos to talk about the API collections and how to do the API versions and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can open API Explorer from Brobench menu. So go here. Okay, so click on API Explorer and it should bring up to this particular page. And when you open for the first time, so there is going to be a single tab and with the default values filled in. So if for whatever reason if there is no tab, so it's going to be in this default space, and then you can click on this as well. So the layout of this particular page is that, and we have this request. Each request open in a separate tab. Of course, you can open multiple tabs like that. And then on the left side, you have API collections, which we'll cover in a different video, how to make use of it, how to do the standard, API exploration, how to save your API request in a custom API, so on and so forth. In this video, we're going to focus on just the request. Okay, so when we come to the request itself, so you have three different pieces. One is that you have a request name. Okay, so because we haven't saved this request, so there is a save icon. Okay, otherwise it's going to be additional actions. So we'll cover that as part of other video. So and then we have the API request header. So it's separate from API, HTTP header. Request header. So we have API type, and then we have a method. We have a path. Okay, that's the API path, and then you can specify the headers and the query parameter by clicking on this button and bring up a new dialog. So edit query and the headers. Okay, so it defaults to REST API with this particular parameter, and you notice that we have a curly braces. So that is the template, the Brobench formula templates, and within a template we can refer to some dynamic variable. As of now, it supports only version, but there may be more enhancements later point in time. Okay, so you can just go and click on send, and then it should send the request and then get the response and show the JSON what it received from the server. So coming to this particular response exploring, so you have multiple pieces. So first of all, we have the view raw. Okay, so by default we show just the body because that's what you are mostly interested in most of the time. But if you click on view raw, we actually show the headers as part of that, as well as the response as it was received. For example, let's say if server sends a wrong JSON that is not able to parse. In this case, that's going to give an error. But if we come back right, it should show the actual response that was received. So you'll be able to make sense of it. It does show the response, the status code. So if anything 200 less than 300, it's 200. Okay, two other corresponding status code and okay. But if it is 300 or 400, it's going to be warning sign. But if it is 500, it's going to be error color. Okay. It shows it is a JSON application JSON that we received, and it is 3.3 kb. And the server took about 435 milliseconds, and this was received at this particular time. Okay. So you have other ways to view and explore this response. First of all, we have this filter by a keyword or the JSON path. So let's say you're looking for something in here. Let's say I'm looking for, query. Okay. So by just typing some part of the keyword, it will show all the lines matching that particular keyword. You can enter multiple keywords. In that case, all the lines matching those keywords will be shown like that. Okay. Um, so you also have a mechanism to do the filtering by the JSON path. The line filter, which is by default, it just filters by the the lines matching that particular keyword. But JSON path can produce a valid JSON based on your criteria. Okay, so let's get a one detail account. Okay, so we'll have a little bit of more details to work with. Update on the account. Okay, so we have this data objects account. and then the describe. Okay, so we have this data. Now let's say if you want to use a JSON path to process this data, you start with a dollar symbol and then you use a standard whatever the valid JSON syntax is. Okay, in this case, let's say we want to show fields and then it will show all the fields. And if you just want to show child relationships and then you can say and then it will show all the child relationships. Notice that the JSON path always produces a valid JSON, whereas the filter it is just the lines. It could be in different places. For example, if you go search for this, it's just going to show like this. This is not a valid JSON, but just it gives you a quick way to search for the data that you're looking for. Okay, we do have this particular controls on the typically on the top right corner of an editor, and that is typically shown in most of the editors in Brobench. And it has there are a couple of controls. This one you can open up a find control, so you can search for data. For example, instead of filtering, if you just want to search for something, you can search like this. Or you have a word wrap, so you can wrap the text around. So if you have a long text, or you can copy, of course, this particular content. Okay. Um, so there are a couple of things here. So let's go and open a particular contact. Okay, for example. So let's say here I open a contact and I see the data. Maybe I'll copy this particular ID. And if you go to API Explorer and bring that particular data, you can see that it brought the whole data back in. Okay. And wherever you have a ID, you can select an ID like this, and you can right click and say view record ID. In that case, it will open that particular ID in the record module. Okay, so that you can explore the more about that particular ID, details of it and all that. For example, you can go ahead and say created by ID, and then you can say view record ID. It will bring all the details. Okay. You also have a mechanism to view the long text area. For example, let's say you have a the API response that contains the longer text. For example, let's open one of the field that contains the long text area. So let's go back here. DO. Okay. So you can see that it has a data here, which is a long text. So I can select that. Let's expand this whole thing. Now I can go here. I can select the whole text that I want to see, and then I can right click and say view value, so that it will show that particular long text in a dialog format. So this is the same dialog that we have explored in the data grid view value dialog. Go check out that particular video to understand more capabilities of this particular dialog, but be aware that you can launch the same dialog from this particular response. So if it is date and time, so this is one of the most inconvenient fact of an API. Typically, you get the date and time in a GMT or a UTC format. It's not a user friendly to understand what is in your local time zone. So in that cases, you can actually right click and view value as a date and time, and the Brobench will show that particular date and time in your local time zone or whatever the time zone that you have set in Brobench or defaults to the connection time zone. Okay, which you can change it from Brobench settings. If you go to the preferences, there you can set which are the time zone that you prefer to be shown all the date and times in Brobench. Okay, uh, so so that is about setting the request, seeing the response, and exploring so on and so forth. So you can also change the request to a different method. For example, let's take this particular and then update the names instead of DL test 3 and let's make it DL test 4. Okay, so update happens via patch API. So let's go to the API and then get it, then update it. We send it. So you see that the request successfully completed because it's green, okay, because it's less than 300. And then it is a 204, so that's the HTTP code to indicate no response. So server said, hey, I processed the request, it was completed successfully, but I am not sending any response because there is nothing to send. So that's what it means. So now if we go back and get it, execute the get request, you should see the name, which is DL test 4. That is the one that we updated. So similarly, you can go and try out other operations that contains the body, for example, the post or a put or a patch. These are the three methods that supports body, but other methods like a delete the head and the gate, they don't support the body. In this case, the body is minimized. Okay. If you want to specify query parameters, you can actually enter them here. I know this particular API doesn't take query parameters, but assume that it does take. Okay, for example, let's say you want to specify fields is equals to name. I want this particular. Oh, it works. Yeah, so you can specify that field here. So it looks like you can include additional fields. For example, created date. Okay, or created by ID or created by dot name. So hopefully this returns that particular attribute as well. So this is a great way to explore a particular request. So have you can notice that sometimes it's not very convenient to enter the query parameters here. In that case, you can click on this icon that opens up that particular the URL path, as well as allows you to edit the header parameters. Okay, so you can click here. You can see that it's brought up all of this information over here, and then you can add additional parameters. For example, date is equals to true. I know that's not a valid one, but let's go and specify that. And when you save it, it will actually encodes all of that and then puts that particular variable as well. Notice that when you edit and save it, it actually URL encodes the values, but when you go back here, it decodes them so that you can edit them in a more human-friendly format. If you want to specify the headers, you can go and specify, for example, ex okay, whatever. So you can specify them and they will be included when you send the request. Okay. So we talked about request, the method type, and then API path, how to set the headers and the query parameters and all that. So Brobench also supports different type of APIs. By default, actually, just as that eventually everything boils down to HTTP request, right? But however, different APIs supports different parameters and different characteristics, response type, whatever. So in that case, it provides a little bit of convenient. So for example, so we provide an API type called sockle. So when you select a sockle, you notice that the method, the body type, as well as a path is hard coded to whatever the value that you want in this case. And if you go run it, so it will actually run a sockle and then return the data. For example, let's go run ID name from account. You can run this API and then it returns the response. Okay, so if you look at it, so there is no API called the sockle. We are calling this query API, but we're just making it easier for it to specify the query. Otherwise, you would have to specify with URL encoding and all that. And also the fact that specify a sockle, we actually load the query editor from the same query editor that is used here. So it just little make it more easier, the syntax coloring and all that. And similarly, you can do sourcel. You can send a sourcel request. You can do GraphQL. So it's a kind of a bare bone at the moment. It doesn't have all the capabilities as the third-party, the GraphQL dedicated API explorers, but you have a means to quickly send some GraphQL query and see what response you're going to get. And similarly, the SOAP, so where you can send an XML request to, for example, you can send a metadata API request to get the response and view it. Okay. So this is about API request. So how to make a request, how to edit the path, how to specify the query parameters and the headers, how to compose a body in case of a post, a put, or a patch, and see the responses. How to see the response, and then how to explore the response, how to view various data elements of the response, so on and so forth. Okay? So we have taken great care to provide a high feature rich and quality API Explorer. I hope you guys make use of it and share some feedback. Thank you.